Historic Preservation Oak Harbor Committee meeting to order. I start with roll call, please. Gideon Kaufman. Greg Lanza. Nick Hamden.
I am here.
And Kelly Bug, I'm here. I'd like to start with the approval of minutes, which will be submitted online and displayed on the board. From the previous meeting.
So we need a motion and a second.
That's right. That's right. Could I have a motion to approve the meeting? Oh my God,
I would like to motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
so that motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I bombed that one.
There's so many of us, it's hard to keep track of.
Oh my God. Okay. And then the minutes will be the public comments. That's right. We're going to move on to the public comments. Okay. Yes, they will be displayed online. The comments that were submitted online will be displayed on the board right back there.
Were there any public comments?
All we would check the HPC box when they submitted comments. It's always saying one thing.
Do we read them out loud?
No, it's just,
Raise ordinance.
Yeah, email's fine.
He set you up.
What are you doing? I come out at 4. That wasn't too bad.
Oh, not bad.
It's like each meeting that we have about this, there's fewer and fewer people. So maybe we'll get down to just a handful.
Couple. Yeah. We're gonna do option 224. Options to the option.
What it would do is it would be, if we meet this standard, you know, it would be like, I just have to figure out how to organize it textually. Then if you cross any of these three thresholds, then the office action.
Less than 10,000 feet is okay. Over 10,000 feet, go election. And what about swap?
If it's 1 to 1, okay. If it's not, election. I'm still considering the whole valuation thing, 1 to 2 thing.
Okay, I'd like to go ahead and move on to see if we have, we don't have anything for no public hearing, so there's no public here, so I'd like to go ahead and move on to the discussion and the action, and we're going to go into the historic registry application training. Ray, please.
Thank you. So what we have here today is essentially an example application for everybody to take a look at as preparation for real applications that will come in the future, hopefully. So what I did is I pretty much took the Smith Park example. You know, we all talked about doing Smith Park as a potential target. It's a city property, so we can nominate it as the city and then go through that process. That's what we did with the Neal Tower. And so what you see there are the nomination form for Smith Park and then the Neal Tower information also attached to your staff report there. And so what I wanted to do is kind of go over the Historic Preservation Commission Register of Historic Places nomination form. What's the information that's included in that, what it is that you all are kind of responsible for reviewing, and what it is you're looking at. So essentially, taking a look at your packet there, when you have the part one is the property information, obviously. That's really straightforward. It talks about, historic names. I discovered that Smith Park was not always Smith Park. It was also called Old Oak Park, Town Park, or City Park. So some of those interesting tidbits that come out. But essentially it's asking for parcel numbers, if there's a legal description of a plat or addition, things like that, and what the nominated elements are. And that's kind of one of the key things that we start into there, the kind of meat and potatoes of the application itself. If we're talking about a principal structure or additions to a structure, or if it's any accessory buildings or outbuildings, or if it's a site, or if it has historic landscaping, walkways, fencing, etc., or if it's interior spaces. So focusing directly on buildings versus sites, this is a site. There are some buildings and some things on the site, but those aren't what's historical and what's important in this context. The owner of the property is obviously the city. The form preparer was me in this case. Sometimes it'll be myself. If we're doing a city property, it'll be a property owner or the nominee of the property or what have you, but that's essentially going to be your main contact information, and they'll be the ones who will be standing over here making the presentation when you actually have an application that comes in. So then it gets to the checklist attachments. You need a site map. You need photographs required. Please label or caption those photographs so we can get context on that. Some of them will be historical photographs. Some of them might be more recent. The historical ones are kind of important if you're looking at, an older site or building, to kind of get a context again of how it started out and what it looks like now. So that is essentially the extent of the application for us. And we have the description below that. So it talks about if there's been any changes to it, but the big portion of it is the physical description narrative. And what I did with this one is kind of melted down what the application that we got from Kyle Renninger, who did a really fantastic job on researching the history of Smith Park and everything. That's what was attached to this as well. We're inviting Kyle back to do a presentation for the full application, the actual application as we go through it in September. And so he's agreed to do that. But essentially what it is, we kind of boiled it down and described what it is that makes this place special and why it should be there or be on the registry. Then there's a check marks if the criteria for designation. The municipal code recognizes 11 criteria of eligibility there, and I'll go through those in just a minute. But I went through and checked 2 here. Only 1 is required. So if you just meet one of those 11 criteria, that kind of meets the very low threshold, honestly, to get onto the registry. If there's any historical data that we have, I did note that it was first platted in 1851, the park area, so that's pretty cool to know. And it was noted as a city asset in 1915 when the city was incorporated. So then there's the statement of significance, describe in detail chronological history of the property. That's pretty much going back to day 1 if possible. Again, we just kind of boiled down the information that we had as, kind of common knowledge, but also the information that the Gary Oaks Society provided for us. And then any attachments that you might have to it. And so, like I said, what I did is just attach the Washington Heritage Register application that Kyle provided. Usually what happens, and this was kind of an unusual case, the state would come after the city registry, but at the time that they applied for this state registry, the Oak Harbor Historic Preservation Commission was kind of in limbo at the time. We didn't have enough members to actually get a quorum together and everything. It was pretty much right after COVID. So we just indicated to the state registry that we were not able to do it at that time, so they kind of just skipped that step. So we're going to go back to it and get that blank filled in, essentially. So if you want, you can go ahead and kind of scroll through that. Like I said, he did a fantastic job of putting a lot of detail in there, the attachments with the photos, a lot of the things that people might not know about the park or may know. If you're new to the community or newer like I am, some of these things are all brand new, but a lot of cool information there. But what I wanted to do is go back to the ordinance, the Oak Harbor Municipal Code, section 1850.050, and that is that list of 11 criteria. And so you go A through K there, and it talks about sites that are associated with events that made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of national, state, or local history, and kind of goes on from there. And so that checkbox list that you saw on that application directly relates to those. And so what you're going to be doing when you review these is making sure that somebody checked off that box and it actually makes sense and fits in there. So that's going to be one of your roles, is to go through the application materials and make sure that that is in fact the case. So when you look at that first one is associated with events that made a significant contribution to local history, I think that he has shown that clearly, that there are all of these events that happened there. They used to have, picnicking and 4th of July and athletic events and all sorts of things that happened at this site from day one of the platting of the properties around the city of Oak Harbor, before it was the city of Oak Harbor. And so if there are more than one of those, you can certainly feel free to kind of check more boxes, but like I said, it only requires one. And so going to step 2 in 1850-050, the process for designated properties or districts. So any person can nominate a building, structure, site, object, or district. And that's important. If you are walking down the street and you say, hey, that's a cool building, I want to nominate it, that's great, you can do it. You have to have the owner's consent, essentially, because there are things, strings attached, essentially, if you become a historic registry property. So you have to get that owner's consent. And so that's kind of an important thing there. In order to fill out the application, you have to be able to provide all those detailed information, the parcel numbers or location, whether it's a UTM reference or an address or whatever that is, and then have the photographs and all the supporting materials that go along with that. And so generally what we look at in those situations is we're expecting probably that the property owner is going to be providing that information to us and being the actual applicant. That's not always going to be the case. Sometimes property owners are interested in being on the registry, but they don't either have the background or the wherewithal, the time, the effort to be able to do all that. And so they might be fine with somebody else being the applicant. And we are fine with that too, as long as we have that signature of the property owner that says it's okay. And so we talked about the roller barn and some other parcels. If they want to be on the registry, we can do that. But we have to have somebody who's kind of a third party be that applicant, if you will. So that's something that we can work through if it's of interest to, a historic property owner. We can be in touch with them. It's not like a conflict of interest kind of thing, but it is kind of a separation just to make sure that we're not, doing all the work essentially, because staff is not supposed to be doing that work, if you will, because we are the ones who are presenting it to you to make that decision. And so that's kind of a key component. I sense there's a question. We can, okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if we wanted to nominate a building, park, or whatever, and we get the owner's consent, but they don't have the history,
Yes.
is it Gideon that we go to get the history, or is there some place we can go?
Gideon,
Other than, or library, or?
Again, that's kind of a separation issue. Gideon, as a city employee, can provide information to you, but he's probably not going to be able to write it out and, present like when Kyle did that full presentation with all the photos and everything, that was something he did. And so that's kind of the dividing line. If for instance, Gideon has a book, he says, here, take a look at this book, and you take the book and write down all the stuff and get the photos and all that,
Personal
then
research.
that's the way you could do it for sure. And we do have the Island County Historical Society and things like that can certainly help out with resources as well.
Your staff, though, correct? We're not.
Correct.
Okay.
That's the
Okay.
line.
Okay, and then, a lot of the history researched it online, because that's kind of what I found it too, is online, a lot of history. I'm really
Yeah.
interested in meeting this Kyle person.
Right, yep. So, going back to the ordinance there, Another big reason that we have the ownership on there is because if they ever want to remove their property from the registry, they can do that as the owner. Or if it transfers to new ownership and that new owner does not want to be on the registry. That was one of the things that when we went through the original code to get this adopted, that the city council at the time was very concerned about, that it not be permanent. And so it's actually really easy to get removed from the registry for a property owner. So do keep that in mind. It's not set in stone, it's not permanent. And that's something you can tell people. Say, look, you know, we would really like you to be on this registry. Just know that if you ever change your mind on this, it's not a huge deal to get out. And honestly, I think that will help kind of push people over that hump, because if they feel like, you know, well, this is going to make it so I can't ever make changes, that's definitely not the case. So that is something to keep in mind. And then finally, the effects of being on the registry, and that's kind of the important reason why somebody would want to be on the registry other than having a plaque or a recognition. I'll just kind of read through it here. Listing on the Oak Harbor Register of Historic Places is a designation denoting significant association with historical, archaeological, engineering, or cultural heritage of the community. Prior to commencement of any work on a registry property, excluding ordinary repair and maintenance or emergency measures defined in the code, the owner must request and receive a certificate of appropriateness from the commission for the proposed work. Violation of this rule shall be grounds for the commission to review the property for removal from the register. Prior to whole or partial demolition of a register property, the owner must request and receive a waiver of the certificate of appropriateness. And once the city is certified as a certified local government, which we are, all properties listed on the City of Oak Harbor Register of Historic Places may be eligible for special tax valuation on their rehabilitation. And that's the key. If somebody takes a historic property and they want to do rehabilitation that meets the certificate of appropriateness, and I'll talk about that in a minute, then they are eligible to get tax breaks on any increase in value that that rehabilitation might cause. So essentially, if you were to spend $100,000 on your historic property and the property value is increased by $100,000, you're still going to be taxed at that original level before you did the rehabilitation. And that's really the key why people might want to be on it. Yes?
Is what you just read in the packet? Or
It is. Well, it's not in the packet. It's in the code. And I will give you that reference.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't include that in the staff report. It is OHMC 1850.050.
Does it also talk about degree? Like, what's it really mean in dollars and cents to the business?
It's the taxes. It's the tax benefit on their property taxes.
It's on the property
Yeah.
tax.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did a bit of more research into the special tax valuation today so that if you guys were doing outreach and people had questions, it would be easier to explain. There's actually a handout through DAP that you can find online. The highlights basically include that it has to be a significant rehabilitation project. I believe it said at least 25% of the value of the property or more in work. They apply through the assessor's office. The assessor reviews that, forwards it to this group to review and make sure the work that's being done actually qualifies as historic preservation and the design guidelines and all that. And then after that, it's managed by the tax assessor. It's a 10-year tax valuation benefit, but there are some penalties if they were to make changes to that work that was approved within that 10-year time period. So I think that's important to know, as while Ray is saying being put on the registry costs nothing, has no penalties for being removed. But if we're selling the special tax valuation as an option they can use while on the registry, they should just know that that is not just through this commission, it's through the assessor. And they can probably do some more research to figure out if a project they have in mind would qualify, what their restrictions would be, and what would cause penalties potentially in that 10-year time frame. So I think that's really valuable to let people know if they're asking what the benefits are. That's definitely a benefit. If they just want to be on the registry for the recognition, great. There's nothing they need to do except the maintenance and let us know if they're doing projects to make sure it maintains historic preservation guidelines. But that benefit, I think, is really an in-depth process, and I think it's worth reading through. And anyone who asks you, I think it's worth giving them the highlights, but having them read through really all the details as well.
we get a copy of those highlights that you just said?
Yes.
Thank you.
So Sarah brought it up too, any changes that are made to a property that's on the registry. Say, for instance, John and Jane Doe come to us and they say, we want our house to be on the historic registry, and we say, okay, we go through that process that we just talked about with the 11 criteria. You've determined that it is now going to be eligible to be on the historic registry. We essentially add that to a map and to our database, and it is listed as being on the historic registry. So if they come in and they say, hey, we're going to be doing this remodeling project to our house, and it triggers criteria in the code, then we will come to you and say, John and Jane Doe want to make renovations or make changes to their existing historic registry house. Here are the plans, and do they still meet the criteria for being on the historic registry? And some of those things will be to review the materials, features, and combinations of features that give the significance to the property to make sure that it's still consistent with that. Say, for instance, they're building an addition onto the side of the house. Does that addition appear to be architecturally similar or complementary to the existing house, or does it completely take away from the character of the original historic register nature of that building? So that's something that will be essentially presented to you with a staff report, and we will give our expert opinion on whether or not that's the case. We don't just plop it down in front of you and say, what do you say? We are going to give you guidance on all of these things. Just know that too. With these staff reports that we do right now are very brief and maybe don't have a lot of information, and that's kind of intentional because we want to give you that information. But if there is technical support that you have that you need, we will be available to do that. And as staff member, Gideon Kaufman will assist with that. He will also probably be sitting up there with you to kind of help be one of the experts to guide your decisions. And when you have those kind of decisions, whether it's the city council, planning commission, or whatever, we definitely have folks who have been there for a long time and have done this before. And a lot of it is kind of leading by example in those situations. So you will have that also to lean on. And don't worry, we're not going to leave you hanging high and dry here to just kind of figure stuff out on your own. We'll definitely be providing that information, like I said, from kind of an expert opinion standpoint. So that is the kind of process in a very brief nutshell. We will get you more if you need those links. We'll email those out to you, the OHMC, the municipal code links, and discuss those further. But the intent now is to get the full application in front of you in September. Now that you kind of know what the process is, and the staff report that I provide to you will talk about those 11 criteria. It'll talk about how it meets or does not meet the criteria. Usually what I end up doing in a staff report is I will take all A through K, and if it meets one of those, I will have a little exposition on how it meets that. And at the bottom, I will say staff recommends approval of this based on. And so that's where you're going to be, making your decision from.
One question, though.
Yeah.
The beautiful thing that Kyle wrote,
Yeah.
how are we supposed to write some, it's not all going to, we're not all going to be able to write something as beautiful as that. Right, that's amazing.
Right. So
But I suppose, I'll do a good job, but he needs to get an Emmy or something for
what
that.
what Kyle did is a very high bar, and
Yeah.
we are not expecting the full detail
Okay.
of daily life that happened in 1851 or whatever.
I love it, though. It's
But
great.
yeah, the thing about it is that Smith Park is a big part of this community.
Yeah.
And if somebody comes in and they have their house that was built in 1927 or something, and maybe they just know a little bit about it, but they have a bunch of pictures, that's probably going to be enough, right? Because you can tell by architecture and by era what is, supposed to be there, and if they replaced the, all the interior woodwork with metal flashing or something, that's not right. So you can tell a lot by photos, and so we will lean on those a lot too. And if somebody provides us an application that's like a paragraph and it says, my house is really cool and I like it, and they give us a picture of the front that they got off the assessor's website, then we'll probably say you need to get a little bit more information to us.
Can you have somebody else write the description other than the person that is?
You can have whoever you want write the description. There will be one person, like I said, who is the applicant, who will essentially represent it over here at the podium. The owner of the property will have signed off on the paper. If you want to have Stephen King write the description, by all means. It really doesn't matter. What we need to know is does it meet those criteria? So. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for you, honestly. And the thing is about it is we're trying to make it easy for you so that people from the community can come in and see how easy it is for them. You know, because we want to encourage this as much as possible, because there are benefits not just for, you know, getting the recognition. There are benefits for them for taxes. There's benefits for the community. If we have a list of historic buildings and sites that we can show off on our website, come to Oak Harbor, look at all this cool stuff we have. So,
Do you guys then have an architect on staff that looks at this? Like if somebody were to put in a major remodel of a building? I mean, I'm not technical enough to know. From maybe an aesthetic viewpoint, you could tell, right?
yes. I took architecture classes in college until I got to the math part. So I am a almost architect. That is one of those things that you know, we can lean on other people for, and if it's a situation where staff, myself, Gideon, whoever is looking at this is having trouble, we will reach out to DAP or the Historic Society or whoever, and you know, see, hey, what do you think about this? Because we want to do it right. We don't want to just, you know, start rubber stamping everything. So I feel what you're saying there. I totally understand. It's not always easiest, but hopefully for the most part it will be fairly straightforward. Yeah. Okay, so that is the extent of the presentation I had for you on the kind of Smith Park run through. Did you have any questions with regard to that, or do you feel ready to receive and review a full application, or do you have any questions for me, concerns, things you might think you need to know or need to know?
No, it actually explained quite a bit what this meeting, don't have any questions yet. But I think I understand a lot more than I did earlier today, previously. That's great.
I'm set.
Okay. So what I'll plan on doing, it probably won't be today or tomorrow because I have a lot of stuff to get done with regard to the things that you saw over my shoulder here. But next week I will get together a kind of little information packet on 1850 and kind of go through some of those high points for you. Here, you know, here's the list of criteria. Here's what you really need to pay attention to for this particular process. And then that way you'll be all set for that Smith Park application. I don't sense that we're going to have any certificate of appropriateness applications within the next year probably, because number one, we would at that time have two historic register properties, both of them being city and both of them not really needing any physical changes. So that would require somebody get onto the registry and then also have a permit to do any physical changes to it. So when that comes up, we will prepare you well in advance like we're trying to do now for this particular application, but I'll give you some kind of basic guidelines on that as well too.
One more question, please.
Yep.
Should we space the applications out? Because I do have a few more in mind. I just kind of wanted to space it out, like 3 months, or if I put an application, wait, you know, to submit another one. I don't want to overwhelm.
I don't see any reason to wait, honestly,
Okay.
because the thing is about it, I just went through, you know, kind of a presentation on what it is you're supposed to be reviewing. You should expect that if we had an actual application like that, it would be about a 10-minute presentation, and however long for you all to kind of discuss, maybe 20 minutes. And so if we had 3 of them in a meeting, by all means, let's do it. I think that holding them back would kind of lower interest levels. If we have 3 people that are interested, let's get them in here.
That's great. Main difficult thing is getting a hold of meeting with the property owners, but no, that's good to know. You got
Yeah.
it.
And the other thing is if if it goes, we're scheduled for 4 to 5 o'clock. If you're okay with going till, past 5 o'clock, going till 6 o'clock, whatever that might require, you can always, say, you know what, we've been here for an hour and a half, I need to go feed my kids or whatever it is, and suspend the meeting or continue it to the next one. We can always do that as well. And I think, do we have the dates reserved on the in-between months too? No, okay. So we would just have to put it off to a following meeting, which would be 2 months later. But at the same time, like I said, I think if you want to keep that interest going, then we should just put whoever we can on there, unless it's a huge list, in which case we'll prioritize the best we can.
Is this room really reserved that much?
It's not. It's just more along the lines of how long do you want to stay here as a commission? Because to be perfectly honest, we could sit here for 3 hours and go through 10 different applications if you're willing to do that.
Oh, so we don't have it reserved on the off months, but that doesn't mean it's already reserved for someone else. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking of the actual dates because we used to have it set up so that it was every month, third Thursday? Whatever, fourth Thursday. But we cut it back because of just trying to maintain interest and keep everybody going, just to do it every other month instead. Yeah. Okay, so that wraps up my training session for 5A there. I do have a note. We can talk about the debrief of the July 4th. There should be a C on there that I forgot to add on, that I did want to have a little discussion about grants. So we'll talk about the 4th of July thing, and I'll leave that to you, Chairperson Bug, and see what we want to talk about with that.
Moving on to 5B, under the discussions, the debrief of the 4th of July City Booth Outreach. I don't know what success any of you had. I unfortunately had to work, so I was unable to make it.
I was there for day one. I don't know, it was after the parade and the crowd didn't seem like they were very interested in learning about historic preservation. But I gave away a couple of these. We've been talking to, just kind of handing them out as we go along with also the Main Street organization. So I'm trying to drum up interest. I have a hard time quantifying, for folks, why they should do it. So I think just explaining that, one, you can make an application, you can gain the tax credits, you can gain the historic value, and at that point, anytime you wanted to really get off of you could also, drop off of it. I'm not sure why that would be a negative, being on, the registry. Is there any negatives you can think of?
The only thing I could think of is if somebody wanted to demo the building, that they would have to be able to get off the registry. And so like I said, the reasoning behind it when we originally discussed this with the city council is they want to make sure that this wasn't going to tie somebody down permanently to being on the registry. So to allow for that flexibility, if for whatever reason somebody has a historic building, house, et cetera, and they decide that their circumstances have changed and they want to tear it down and build something new, they can get off the registry and do that. Yeah.
I think if we expound on that, and then Sarah's summary.
And as well as the nomination applies to the property through multiple property owners. So if the property sells and the new property owner decides they want to make changes to that building that no longer make it, historic, then they would probably either want to remove themselves, or they would be removed by the Historic Preservation Commission for no longer maintaining that status. So I think it's just nice to let people know that if they sell the home, new owners don't necessarily have to be restricted to that. However, I think it's worth mentioning if a homeowner does apply for the tax valuation and within that 10-year time period they sell the home, that might move on and that might impact the next owner. So those things are probably worth considering as well.
And I think a summary of what you had stated, the benefits of it would be nice too, because I really wasn't for certain on, I didn't really know what the benefits were, to be quite honest, but what you had suggested, I really like that. It's kind of like a nice highlight, I guess. So,
And just finishing, Gideon was also there during the 4th of July at the booth. And again, I'm not sure how many people we really talked to there that, you know, would really listen. But
And it is,
gave away a lot of suckers.
it's unfortunate that the events around it and nearby that would draw in people, probably push people away from the, what was it, fair thing. So probably had less foot traffic than planned originally. I don't have those numbers, but I'm just assuming there's less people who went, unfortunately.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was there Friday afternoon. It was pretty slow. So it's unfortunate. You know, we did what we can. We had a few people stop by. I didn't talk to anybody personally about historic preservation in particular, or some other topics that were brought up. But, you know, I think the thing is that we should not be, you know, put back by this. Like, there's still other things to do and other ways that we can get the information out there. I think that whatever community events that we have upcoming, we can find ways of having a presence. But also, I think one of the things that Sarah and I talked about was trying to get word out through our online presence, Facebook and all that sort of stuff. So that's something we'll be working on with our communications folks coming up. You know, just doing little drops here and there. Hey, did you know? Kind of things. So hopefully, you know, trying to get people interested. And the thing is about it too, is I think it's one of those kind of snowball things. If we can get a few people interested, it might really start to take off. So
do we have a Facebook? Is one that you make, or I would make Oak Harbor Historic?
no, we
so
have
can
we
make
have a
posts
city
about it?
one. Yeah, we have a city one, and we have a person who is our communications director who runs it, and therefore everything comes out nice and consistently, and you know, with certain standards to it. We found that having multiple people using that kind of makes for.
So we couldn't have a Oak Harbor Historic Preservation Commission one?
I don't
or
think that's
no?
what they
Okay.
want to do. Yeah, I think they want to keep it just to one, because the tendency is when you start getting bombarded with lots of different sources, people start to ignore it, honestly.
Can we make posts on that one?
You could, what you could do is if you want to write something up, we will submit it to our communications folks. You know, if we have like photos or things like that, you know, it might not be a bad idea to have a regular kind of weekly, here's your, you know, picture of something historic from the city of Oak Harbor.
Last one. Can I do one for myself? Chairperson, Oak Harbor Historic Preservation, making announcements, trying to get people involved, or no?
I would say no, but talk to Maggie. She's our new communications person, and find out what her thoughts are on that. I know that I think they created the ones for the city councilors. Is that right?
In the past, our city attorney has advised commissioners, if they're going to do something on social media as a commissioner, speaking as a commissioner, that you create a separate Facebook page for that, so that any communication, because everything you do under that account, if you mention or if you're representing yourself as a commissioner, it becomes open to public record requests. So if you would like to do that, you can create yourself a separate account, and you could post things on there, but it would open it up to public records at that point. I think the best suggestion is we can provide anything that you would like us to share to our communications manager, and they share things for all the boards and commissions there on the main city page, so that way people who are already subscribed to the City of Oak Harbor's page will see it all there in the same place, rather than having to go somewhere else to find this information. And so she can share things for this board as well.
I would suggest that that's probably really the way they want to have it done too. Because then they don't have to worry about a rogue commissioner going crazy. No, it's one of those things where I think, number one, the following is already there. So you don't have to try and build up a following. But secondarily, it takes a lot of the pressure off you. And if we have things scheduled out, we can give them a list of 10 things to schedule out over the next 10 weeks. And so if you all want to think of some ideas or have pictures or whatever it is you want to do, then by all means, let's coordinate on that.
One, as I was just curious about announcing that we were putting a certain building on the local register.
Yes.
Like to announce it on Facebook, maybe even Would Be News Times. I didn't know, that's kind of was my,
sure.
what I wanted to do. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we will definitely be talking to Maggie about, is getting some of that stuff out there, because Smith Park's a big deal, right? And the whole parks discussion has kind of stirred that up, and we're not here to sell like we're here to preserve them and keep them nice. So that's one of the things that we're doing. Okay.
No. Like, you hear a lot of talk about the windmill.
Yeah.
The windmill's gone, right? I mean, the old windmill. And they're not preserving any part of that to build the new windmill. They're just gonna build a new windmill.
The windmill was built in 1979, by the way.
Oh, that wasn't very old anyway.
It was not that old. So the windmill was built fairly recently. It has to be at least 50 years old, and I know for a fact that's not 50 years yet. That was a landmark, a cherished landmark of the community, but not historic yet. And so that didn't even really kind of cross into any decision-making that happened with that. My understanding was that it was in such poor condition that it just had to be removed, and there was nothing left to save, really.
Do we have any historical, I'm not gonna say buildings, but historical landmarks that really distinguish Oak Harbor?
So
Other than like Smith Park?
we do. I would say, and we've had this discussion before, I think, Oak Harbor is different than a lot of other communities around here. Like Oak Harbor didn't grow up in the 1850s and have, big, giant, cool brick buildings like Port Townsend did. We weren't, a port community or a fishing village or whatever like some other places in the area. Oak Harbor's big growth period was during the 1950s and 60s, which is historical. If it were up to me, I would go up to Northeast 5th or 6th Avenue up there and do a historic district of houses that were built in 1962. Because they're all, fairly consistently maintained in that era. So to say that, we don't have like one big thing, I don't think, that people know Oak Harbor for, which is fine.
What was the name of that street?
I think it's Northeast 5th. I'm not sure.
Thank you.
I can double check that. I have it on my computer downstairs. But the thing is, there are lots of interesting things to see here and interesting neighborhoods. You go over to the Oaks over here, in the neighborhood over there, and there's lots of interesting buildings and interesting things to see. And the thing is about that is you can create a district, out of consolidated interests, That being said, creating a district is a lot more difficult than just having a single site or a single house. So I think the thing is what we can build off of is things like Smith Park and things like the Neal Tower and Roller Barn. That there are kind of interesting nodes that you can kind of see from there. Like Smith Park, if somebody wanted, if for instance we had Smith Park on our website that says, Oak Harbor's Historic Registry introducing Smith Park, and somebody wants to go look at it, well, maybe they walk around and they see, oh, this is kind of an interesting neighborhood. There's lots of oak trees here, there's older houses here, there's interesting stuff to see. And so it kind of builds off of that.
Any idea about the fountain as you're going on to the Navy base? I've been trying to figure that out.
What's that?
The fountain as you're going on to the Navy base here, there's a big old fountain, and I'm trying to research and find out if the Navy built it or if it was in the Main Street. Where you go through the gates, it's right on, And it's a lot like at the roundabout there. You go to the right to go to the commissary, or you go up left to
Oh.
go to the Marine Corps Relief. It's a big, huge fountain, and
Yeah.
nobody. I was kind of hoping somebody knew. I'm going to figure it
Not
out.
allowed to see it.
Yeah, same. So that, a lot of that stuff, and that is interesting, a lot of that stuff was built of that time period, 1940s, right? And the Onion Dome building over here has kind of an interesting Art Moderne look to it. And some of those buildings over there, kind of that Art Deco international style look, that became later on parts of the college campus and just over the fence, essentially still on the base. So there are sites that are on the base also that could be considered historic, but I don't know.
That's a whole other can of worms because I
That's a
checked into
whole other
that.
can of
Mhm.
worms and bureaucracy that I don't even know about. I wouldn't even know where to
They
begin.
have obligations. I had no idea that the touch and go, the noise, that was dealt with the historic preservation. I did not realize that that was the deal, that the historic preservation, because it was an environmental thing, you cannot make Coopville historic or something like that, but that involves historic preservation. Did you hear that? The growlers, that was historic preservation that was fighting it, the noise. So that's
I
kind of a
don't
big
know
deal.
about that, yeah.
Yeah, and the Navy has certain ordinances. They're supposed to work with the historic committees. They are supposed to, but it's a lot of processes. But anyway, there's a lot of information on that online. So if anyone wants to look at it, go for it. But I was like, whoa, a lot of information here.
Yes.
But
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so anything else about the 4th of July booth, future?
I was gonna relate it to city outreach and upcoming events.
Yes.
Now, obviously, I'm not going to assume we're going to necessarily just fully agree that Smith Park should be something before it's presented to us, of course. But the next big event, because I don't think we have one of those summer series this year, or it might be in Coopville, but they do have the music festival
Yes.
on Labor Day weekend,
Yeah.
which Labor Day, I think, is the 2nd of September this year, so it's really early on. If we had, for example, a special session next month, the 4th Thursday of August is the 22nd, and there's still a lot left time of August after that. If we were to somehow approve of a new thing in that time, it could also be, officially presented, potentially, I don't know how fast these things work, as part of the beginning of that festival, which is like right there, and Smith Park's right there, and that could be combined instead of in September, weeks afterwards. I'm sure there's a lot of, that's too fast, it's probably, but,
Yeah, I'm not-
just a bunch of hypotheticals.
I believe, are we
Yeah.
going to have some kind of a ceremony? That was the question. Are we going to
I'm
do
not
some-
sure how the scheduling would work, but to be perfectly honest, if we wanted to, here's what I would say. Because I know that the Gary Oak Society and folks who really like Smith Park are very involved in it, that I think that's a good idea. I just think the notice is too short. And scheduling a special meeting is kind of, that would be really short. But if we wanted to really get the word out about Smith Park is going on the agenda for the September 23rd or whatever meeting it is, we have seats. Come show up. See what it is we do. And, this is kind of a big deal. The Smith Park is now going to be on our historic registry. We have 2 things on the historic registry. Who amongst us would like to include more? And so I think if you engage, or if we are able to engage the Gary Oak Society and people who are really into the park, whatever groups there may be, or just individuals, people who live in the neighborhood, then that could be kind of the snowball that gets things going.
Can we say things like, it's going to be on the preservation list?
I would say
In advance?
you could say that it's going to be on the agenda to be potentially approved for the list. We're not going to deny it, but you can't really say that. I didn't just say that, but
You have
it's
to be
one of those
politically
things.
correct. Come on.
I just don't want to break the law. It has
No.
to go through the forms, it has to have the agreements, just like
Yeah,
anything else,
and it does, and it's a city-owned property. So, like I said, it's the information that we have already. And I sent an email to Kyle. I was like, hey, can I use this as a kind of training tool? And he's like, sure. If we just copied and pasted that into an application, there's so much information there that is a slam dunk to approve it. So, going through him and saying, look, Kyle, would you mind refiguring this report that you've put together, this data that you put together to say Oak Harbor City Historic Registry instead of Washington Historic Register, I'm sure he would be happy to do that.
That was my next question. So that's pretty much all that we would be waiting, because we would have to fill out the application.
And,
That's
and
what
I would do
one of
that
us that
because,
you do
because
this.
it is a city property and we, technically the city are the applicant. I
Okay.
can do that one. It's all the
Gotcha.
other ones that are private property that we have to kind of let
Okay.
somebody else do. Yeah.
I have some things out of that. I'd like to go ahead and move to the members' comments, if we're okay with that. after
I have,
that,
I
or
have one
having-
thing
oh,
before we get there. Sorry. It wasn't on the agenda, if that's okay. We talked about grants previously, and I know that was one of the priorities that we had discussed from the previous couple of meetings. And one of the big ones was let's see, where'd it go? I lost it now. CLG grants. The deadline was in April, and we kind of didn't really meet that because we weren't really prepared for it. We do have somebody on staff who is a grants administrator, and so we have this kind of in our mind already for next year. A CLG grant for somebody to, we'll put together, write up a grant for somebody to come do an inventory or whatever it is. And I think that's what we talked about, was the inventory was kind of the big deal, because we can have dots on a map, but those dots don't really mean anything, and that's just dates, literally. So having that kind of fleshed out, I think would be a really good thing. So we are going to go for that one. And that is a city, staff-driven thing. We did do some research into other grants, and I found a couple based on, just off of the DAP website. There's Heritage Barn grants, and I was thinking of that for the roller barn, and I don't know if the standards are it still has to be used as a, quote, barn or not, or if they're just looking to preserve the building, but that might be something worth looking into, and that is something that the owner would have to apply for. And
That's
then
great.
we also have some other ones that are kind of based on, different sites. We have one that, and this doesn't apply to us, but a historic county courthouse grant, which is kind of interesting. That's obviously Coopville, but there are others in here. There's a historic cemetery grant. And I know that we have a couple of cemeteries that are historic and kind of not really used up on Oak Harbor Street. So that's a potential as well. Yeah.
Could I back you up for this, so the CLG grant, you said you were going to have somebody come in before the grant for next year to do the historical counting or the,
So, yeah,
Who-
what that is, the CLG program, they have grants that you can apply for as a CLG city, which we are. That what we do essentially is we write up a request that says we would like to have somebody come in and do an inventory on all of our historic properties.
you know, what position that person would be? That would be an actual historical, would that be a historian, or you don't know what their name?
Potentially, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
All about networking.
And that's the thing about it is it depends on what the grant is. Say they give us a grant for $300. Then we go to the high school and say, hey, high school kid, can you go walk around and look at these houses and take pictures for us? And yeah, here, $300, here you go. But, that's the thing. And we have to write it up, and we have somebody that's their actual job to do, and she's really good at it. So I have no doubt that we can get something that is an actual, thing.
What's her name?
Her name is Wendy Horn.
And what is her position?
She is our grants administrator.
She is the grant?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what she does. So, and then another one I saw was, and this one I know that has come to this city before, is the T-Mobile hometown grants. And again, that's kind of it's not a city thing. It's a charitable organization or individuals, et cetera, can apply through T-Mobile to get grants for certain projects within the city. And so that's also a potential. Yeah. And that might be, if somebody has a private property that's utilized by the community or something along those lines. I'm not sure what their full standards are, and there's a whole huge list here. And so it's a lot of, if it fits, then, have a private property owner apply for it. If it's a city thing, we can look at it. But most of them are going to be mostly for private owners and things like that.
We go after that grant every year.
I mean, I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought my light was on. I guess
okay.
I'm blind too. But, yeah, we go after that grant every year. I don't think we've gotten one yet, but we keep trying.
Yeah. I mean, it's there. so
That's the
why
name of the
not?
game. Just
Yep.
keep pushing.
Yeah. Okay, so that is the extent of the staff presentation. So if you would care to move on to the member comments.
Moving on to the member comments. Does anyone have any comments?
Just to better reiterate, if we had contact, I mean, we know who runs the Oak Harbor Music Festival, and it's not a government group, it's private locals, right? There's not really like a speech at the beginning that people, it's just like people show up for 3 days. So I don't even know if there would be a time to announce it or anything. But if we had like a sign, hey,
So
Neil Park, not Neil Park,
here's a thought for Main Street. There are a couple of empty storefronts right now. Would it be possible to have some historic photos, some information, like if you put a couple of historic photos in an empty window with some information that says, you know, Historic Preservation Commission or historic, do you have a historic property? Would you like to be on the registry? Maybe that's something that Main Street Association could kind of coordinate with. We can provide the materials. I think the thing is that we all saw the weaknesses and the strengths of having a booth. Weakness is you have to be there. So if we can have something that is static, you know, either it's in a window or it's a poster or something like that, then people can just walk by and see it. And maybe there's a QR code. We can coordinate that stuff, but like the hosting and coordination of it, if we can get through Main Street Association or one of the realtors who's got, you know, an empty space down there, would be Wild Bird or something like that.
I will check that out.
Okay.
Yeah, we do things like that all the time, as Main
Right.
Street is fill empty windows with stuff.
Yeah.
That'd be a good idea.
and if we can have
Um,
it before that festival.
Yeah, do
You could
guys-
have it up all the time, honestly, but I'm thinking specifically for the festival, if it's,
I noticed running around
Available.
the building that you guys have a lot of historic pictures.
yes.
And it would be possible maybe to get some of those pictures blown up, larger size, and
Probably, yeah. I mean, we have a large-scale printer. I mean, they wouldn't be huge. We do have, you know, cost limitations, so.
no, but big enough that when you fill a 10 by 10 spot
Yeah,
in an empty window
yeah, yeah. Definitely attention grabbing,
with the words, you know,
yeah,
do you have a historic building or site? Would you like, you know?
yeah. Yeah, that's something we can coordinate if we can find a host. It would not take that much of our time to get some things together to tape to the inside of a window.
I'll check with Margaret. She knows everybody. and-
Perfect, yeah.
I just wanted to share that I had a meeting with Bill Waite, who is the groundsman, who's the manager of the buildings over there at the Whidbey Presbyterian Church. It was a very neat meeting. I got a tour of the building and everything, and he's very much interested, so is the congregation, in being put on the list. And I have copies of, I believe, their architectural maps. I've taken pictures. Their history books, which was really neat. I got to take those home and read them. They were pretty amazing because they're not released. I couldn't find any information online at all, but he has actual history books.
Cool. Is that the one that's right over here at the corner?
Yes.
At 8th and,
The one right from
Midway.
the kitty corner from the gas station.
Yep.
Yes, and it is connected with Smith Park, a lot of the history.
Yep.
I was kind of interested to know that the house behind Whidbey Presbyterian Church that was, I think it was in 2014 or 2010, sold at an auction for $1.
And moved.
Yes, I was over in Coopville.
Yes.
So the Oak Harbor's first mayor's house is in Coopville right
Yep.
now. They didn't have enough, it was a shelter, and they didn't have enough money to repair it, is what Bill said, so, but anyway, so it's been moved. But it's just a great building. It's beautiful architecture. Pretty sure I have all the proceedings to move forward that, and I would love to go ahead and do that. Just wanted to share that with you. And my next step is the roller barn. I'm having a hard time getting hold of them, so I'm going to go in. I don't know if they check their email or whatnot.
yeah.
So,
I mean, it sounds like you have most of the materials already.
yes,
And then
I do.
just that write-up, you know, those 2 blank spaces on the application. Yeah, I think that would be great.
Yep.
And I think the beauty of something like that, like I said, with Smith Park, you have a bunch of people who are really into it. That has a built-in audience. Invite the congregation.
yes.
Have them come, because you know that 1 or 2 of them have a house that might be historical too. Get that snowball going.
Bill was very much historical himself. He knew all about it and knew a lot more. He was very much into it and grateful. Excuse me. I think it was something he's been wanting to do for a long, long time. So,
Great, yep.
but the only thing about that is there's not one owner. I don't know if that would suffice because there's it's a congregation. So churches don't have an owner. So what signature would you need?
That's a really good question.
It's usually a 501c something that
Yeah, and
owns,
there has to be somebody who signs paperwork.
Yeah.
And it would be that
called the
person.
president. You know,
And it might be literally a president or pastor or whatever it is. I'll tell you what, if you have all the materials together and you want to piggyback that one in September with Smith Park,
I absolutely can.
if we can do that, let's do it.
yeah.
He had all the information. I just couldn't believe it. The books, everything, rolled up maps with the drawings and everything. So yes, I'm ready to go.
Okay.
I will do that for you. Yes.
Okay. And did we decide that she can or can't be the applicant?
So just a little education on our nomination form is in the conversation I had today with the DAP representative, Michelle, the one who did our training in January. We decided it would probably be best if we amend our nomination form. So on the second page, there's a section that says owner of property, and then form preparer is below that. A commissioner, because you guys are the approvers, cannot also be the applicants. You can help and be the form preparer. However, if the owner is not interested in being the applicant themselves, they will need to designate someone to be the applicant on their behalf. But there's nothing stopping you guys from helping them prepare the forms and the materials that are presented, but someone will need to be an applicant that's not sitting behind this table, because the commission is ultimately the approver.
The owner will have to appoint an applicant if they're not willing to.
They will need to designate someone to represent them as an applicant, because while they can give consent for someone else to apply on their behalf, that person should, if it's not them, then it should be someone else we can identify as an applicant.
Sure. And does that applicant have to have any criteria? No, just stipulated by the owner.
I think we should make sure they've given written permission
Okay.
in their application forms.
Okay.
Yes.
It sounds like Bill is going to be the person in this case. Yeah, and like she said, if you want to assist with the preparation and, you know, show him what it is you're looking for, it's writing, you know, maybe a page. It's fairly straightforward and checking off some boxes. If you have all of those materials already together, the history, you know, actual text and photos and everything, you're 90% of the way there, to be perfectly honest.
I don't mind who's the applicant. I just want to get it.
Yeah.
Recognized. So we'll get it up there. It doesn't matter to me who does it, and I'll help with it or whatever. But as long as it gets recognized, it's fine with me. Perfect.
I think it's a good idea for us to not be the applicant most of the time. But in situations like, let's say I own a barn from 1910 in Oak Harbor. I don't, you know, hypothetically, and I'm the only one who lives in said barn that used to have weddings. Obviously, I would make sense as the applicant. Would I just recuse myself from the vote, and it could still happen
Yeah,
as a
you-
presenter if I was? Just to
right,
make it
and
on the-
because you're the owner, you would probably have to. If you weren't the owner, the issue,
Okay,
the
yeah.
other issue
So
becomes
owner, I would have to recuse no matter what.
right.
Yes.
The other issue becomes, do we have a quorum? And can we afford to have you over there instead of over here?
So we just need the other three.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and so if you were the owner, you would recuse. If you were just assisting or had nominated or something like that, and we have the preparer, the form preparer, and the applicant and the owner over here, then that's okay.
So just to recap, it has to be the owner to fill out the application unless they appoint somebody. Unless you're the city and it's the park and you have permission to do it.
Yes.
Correct. Thank you. Any other comments? Well, the next scheduled meeting date, did we want to discuss if we were going to meet before September?
I don't think we can.
Okay,
Yeah.
then it'll be September 26th, 2024. Right? Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Commission motions to adjourn, please.
Sorry. I motion we adjourn the meeting.
I second it.
Meeting is
All
adjourned.
those in favor?
All those in favor? Meeting is adjourned.